Hi everyone, my name is Ariel Rachmanov with Aliyah Homes. Here we have Mr. Zevi Weisinger, a very good friend of mine from high school, made Aliyah straight from college, and is the COO of Kinemon Catering. And today we will be hearing his Aliyah experience. And Zevi, take it away.
Hey everyone. So again, as thank you for the wonderful intro, Ariel. Um, so my name's Zev Weisinger. I made Aliyah in 2015, right after the Chagim with my wife and my 6-month-old daughter. I made Aliyah basically after I graduated from college, Yeshiva University. I graduated from Yeshiva University with a degree in management, specifically entrepreneurship, which is perfect for Israel. And I came here with basically no job prospects because when I made my Aliyah, my pre-Aliyah flight, which was basically right before Rosh Hashanah, before I made Aliyah, we came on the pilot trip. That's what it's called, because we knew we were making Aliyah right after Sukkot, and we decided that we wanted to find a place because we had heard some horror stories of coming to Israel to find a place and not being able to find a place for a couple of months. The Jewish Agency does have a location where you are able to stay, I think, up to 6 weeks. But with a 6-month-old daughter, we weren't really so keen on staying there and also staying by family. We wanted to have a place so we went to Israel for 10 days, got a really cheap flight through Air France. And over 10 days, we looked at 33 apartments in person. That was 33, yes, 33 apartments in person. It was a little nuts with the 6-month-old. Air France lost our stroller, so that was also fun. But my wife wanted to live in Yerushalayim because she always wished her dream was to live in Yerushalayim, to be within walking distance of the Kotel. That anytime, anywhere, anytime we wanted, we'd be able to go to the Kotel. So we really concentrated our search on Yerushalayim. While we were here on the pilot trip, my wife was also applying to grad school for her master's in neuroscience. So she met with Bar Ilan, she met with Hebrew U, she met with Weitzman in Rehovot. So while my wife and my daughter were in Yerushalayim, I did go. Part of the 33, some of them were in Givat Shmuel in the Merkaz, because in Givat Shmuel, I really focused on Givat Shmuel because Givat Shmuel had a number of friends who lived there that I went to yeshiva with, and it has a very young couple community there. We ended up narrowing it down to 4 apartments in Yerushalayim. And we were lucky that the first apartment that we looked at, an important question: how did we find the apartment?
Okay.
The way we found it was actually through a website called Yad .co.il. It's yad2.co.il, where you can basically find a whole bunch of apartments that are available. We did that and we lucked out, but I have found many, many, many people who have done it and have not lucked out. So my recommendation is to find a real estate agent that you trust, that you get a good vibe off of, and work with them. Because again, we looked at 33 apartments where we probably could have just looked at 5 or 6 and been okay. My father-in-law recently just bought an apartment in Netanya. He went through a real estate agent, and within a week, he found it, and he never stepped foot here in Israel. He had us look at with the real estate agent, and it was a really easy, simple process.
Right.
That being said, we narrowed it down to about 4 or 5 apartments, and we found the apartment that we're in. We lucked out that our landlords were not using an agent at all. They were doing it on their own, and they actually picked us because we were a young religious couple. They are a Sephardi Haredi couple. Ironically, the woman, the wife of the couple, is Rav Ovadia Yosef's granddaughter.
Wow.
So our daughter's name is Amalia Margalit. Her name is Margalit. And she's like, where do you get Margalit from? So we explained the name. We're like, where did you get it? She's like, oh, I'm named after my grandmother. Oh, that's so nice. Oh, yeah, my grandmother was Rav Ovadia Yosef's wife. We're like, wait, what? So they were really happy to see that we had that we were religious, that we were young, so they really chose us over anybody else. And we're about a 45 minute to an hour 15-minute walk from the kotel. We're in a community where we moved, had no idea what it was going to be, and we were like, we're near Katamon. We live in a community called Shkunat Pat. It's
Yeah.
right between Malcha and Katamonim. And in terms of location, at the time we didn't realize, but now we do. After 5 years of living in the same apartment, it is an amazing community. It's an amazing location. There's a bus basically to everywhere in the entire Jerusalem area. There's buses to Efrat. There's a bus that picks up down the block that goes straight to Tel Aviv. There's 3 pickups in the morning that go straight to Tel Aviv. They're building 2 different lines of the light rail around my apartment to 2 different areas, to Malcha and to Emek Rafaim. So it's a really centrally located area, and pricing wise, it is really well priced.
Wow.
So we really lucked out. The community that we're in is amazing. When we moved here, as I said, we're near Katamon, so we're like, look, we'll figure it out. We live down the block from a Midrash Midrashat Nishmat, which has an American program. We're like, worst comes worst, we'll find people. We'll walk. We don't mind walking. Turns out the community that's here is amazing. They're probably about 75% of the community, at least one family member speaks fluent English, where like if you walk in this community, you would have no idea that a lot of people speak English. So we really lucked out. My wife ended up going to Hebrew U for her master's in neuroscience. It was actually computational neuroscience. She is in the middle of finishing her thesis for that. She works in high tech now. She started working about a year and a half ago for a medtech AI startup called BrainQ Technologies. They're doing some pretty crazy revolutionary stuff. And my wife is their neuroscientist on staff. So she does a lot of their scientific documents, stuff like that. So we've been here for 5 years. I have now 3 kids.
Wow.
2 of my kids who were born here. We actually had the bris in my apartment, which my landlords were so happy to hear about, so happy to see, because they really are happy to see that their home that they bought, that they're renting out to somebody, has really become a bias Neman B'Yisrael.
Right.
And
And recently, your wife gave birth?
No. So my youngest is about 2.5. I have a 3-year-old turning 4 in about a month. And I have a 2-year-old and I have a 6-year-old.
All right.
So they were the 2-year-old's bris was in our home. And they were just really, really, really impressed. And so yeah, that's about us. I do have some recommendations, some things to say about Aliyah.
Please do. That's exactly why we're here. Like,
this may be a bit controversial and what not many people, or maybe
it's not for everybody. Be honest. That's why we're here. We want people to understand the process, whether it's difficult or easy. I mean, if it is difficult, maybe there are ways and solutions we can, come up with that can, help them with 100%. That.
So my process was actually interesting, because we decided to make Aliyah right after I graduated in April of 2015. I graduated from Yeshiva University, and my wife and I are like, basically, yeah, we're going to move. Why did we want to move? So the reason why we wanted to move was because my wife wanted to. Right. But the reality is that I deep down, I always saw myself living in Eretz Yisrael. And the reality is that I've seen my parents had wanted to make Aliyah for years, and Right. They would always say that they wanted to make Aliyah, and there were complications that basically forced them to stay in the States. They've actually made Aliyah right before Rosh Hashanah this year. They made Aliyah. They Right. live about a 25 to 30-minute walk away from my apartment, which is great. We just spent 2 days because the power went out of my apartment, because they're doing the construction for the light rail around us. So Right. The power went out unexpectedly. We went to my parents, which was a quick 5-minute drive, and my kids ended up hanging out with the grandparents, which was with the segers has been a very rare occurrence, unfortunately. Um, but so our process was we decided, we sent in the paperwork, and a small complication happened. My wife was taking care of the paperwork and she uses a Mac and she
Okay.
only uses Safari when using a web browser. Apparently, the form only goes through Internet Explorer. So she didn't have Internet Explorer on a computer, so we didn't hear anything back from them for like 2.5 months. And we're like, what's going on? At like in the middle of like July, August, and they're like, oh, we never got the paperwork. And we're like, we sent the paperwork. They're like, did you send it on Safari? And they're like, and we're like, yeah. And they're like, you need to send it on Internet Explorer because it doesn't work on Safari. We're like, thanks for telling us that. So we sent it, and that's when we did the pilot trip. Was right after that because we knew that we were going to get approved.
Right.
We since it was so late, we kind of were rushed in our process. All the appointments that, in order to be approved for Aliyah, you need to meet with the Jewish agency.
Right.
With Corona, it's probably been a little difficult.
Do you have any advice on meeting with the Jewish agency? Can you share us about that experience?
Sure. So basically, it's kind of funny because we were late to the party in terms of doing that. So we did our pilot trip and we were approved for all the details. And they're like, in order to get fully approved and to get your visas or whatever, you need to meet with the Jewish agency. We're like, great. So we're like, we were living in Washington Heights
Right.
by YU because I just graduated. So we're like, okay, let's book an appointment in New York. No appointments for the next 3 months.
Wow.
So we're like, that's not okay. So then we're like trying to figure out, we're calling, and then I said to my wife, I'm like, why do we need to do it in New York? Let's call the Jewish agency and see if we can do it elsewhere.
Right.
So we called the Jewish agency. I'm like, do we need to do it in New York or can we do it anywhere we want? Or that's available. And they're like, you can do it wherever you want. It needs to be at the Jewish agency. So we said to the Jewish agency, like, where on the East Coast is the next open appointment? So they said, and this was like during Aseres Mei Tshuva. Okay, this is like right after Rosh Hashanah, after we came back from the pilot trip, and they're like, well, there's an opening on the second day of Chol HaMoed in Miami.
What? Don't tell me you went to Miami.
Yeah, we went to Miami for 18 hours. We booked a trip. We booked a trip using points from a credit card, which ended up being like it was like $70 a person, plus the rental of the car to get to and from. We were there for 18 hours on Chol HaMoed.
Should have at least made a trip out of it. 18 hours is nothing.
The problem is we didn't take our daughter with us. Our daughter was by my parents or by my in-laws, and it was like really she was only 6 months old, so we didn't feel comfortable like leaving her for 2 days to go, and we really couldn't bring her with us. So we went down to Florida. We had the interview. By the time we landed in New York, they told us that we were approved for Aliyah. We had to go pick up the visas from the consulate in Manhattan, which was basically my dad and I driving and double parking in front of 1600 Avenue of Americas in Manhattan, me running upstairs, grabbing my visas, coming downstairs, and within a week, our Aliyah flight was booked. For us, I know people like the pomp and circumstance, and maybe with the new Corona situation, it's not like that. We did not a private flight, but we did a more private Aliyah. It was not a group flight. It was not a even chartered flight. It was none of that. It was just us on the plane. There were two other. There was one family, one couple, and one single guy who was also on the flight making Aliyah. Other than that, we were the only people on the flight making Aliyah.
Got it.
And it was funny because we were sitting in the worst seats on the plane, like all the way in the back next to the bathroom. But we didn't care because we're making Aliyah. It was a free flight, whatever. So the stewardesses come over and they're talking to us because we have the kid and they have to. And one of the other things that we do whenever we fly, and I've flown a number of times, I always buy candy for the stewardesses or the stewards or whatever. I buy a bag of candy, like chocolate, gummy bears, whatever, like gummy candies or whatever. And I give it to them and I say, you guys have a hard job. Here's something to appreciate you. So they were saying thank you. And they're like, what? And we explained that we were making Aliyah, and they were just floored that we were making Aliyah. And this was in the middle of when there was all the stabbing incidents in Israel.
Right. Yeah.
And they were just so enamored that we were making Aliyah in the middle of this situation that they gave us a free bottle of wine. which I didn't
Wow.
end up drinking for the next probably 6 months later. We ended up drinking it.
What kind of
But
bottle?
it was Racanti, like one of the bottles that they sell at duty free. So they chipped in and they all got us
Got it.
a bottle of wine, which was really nice. But the process of getting through the Jewish agency, like we got there, they put us in. One thing that they don't tell you, nobody told us this. You basically have like 30 seconds to pick a kupa for health insurance.
30
So
seconds.
yeah, do
From
your
when?
research. Do your research before you get on the plane, because they don't really give you. They're not allowed to recommend any, and you just have to pick it. So
30
if they
seconds
change
from
it
when? From
from when they start doing the paperwork, they'll be like, "What coupa do you want?" And we were like,
Interesting.
"What do you mean? What coupa do you want? What health insurance do you want? Clalit? Do you want Muchadet? Do you want Maccabi? Do you want Lumit?" And we're like, "We don't know. What do you suggest?" They're like, "We're not allowed to suggest, so pick one." So we're like, so we quickly looked up our address and we're like, okay, closest clinic is a Clalit. Okay, we're gonna do Clalit. So far, we've been very happy, but that's something that my parents, when they made Aliyah, they made sure to find doctors because my father has some health things to make sure they found doctors that and make sure that which kupa. So they picked a kupa based on the doctors that they knew were going to be suited for my father's
Right.
various health things.
So now let me ask you a question. Do you speak fluent Hebrew or do you speak any Hebrew?
So okay, so that's a great question.
We
Um,
have to know. We have to know for the
yeah,
for the people
so
watching.
I am not afraid to speak Hebrew, and
Okay.
that's a big difference. I'm not afraid to break my teeth. I'm not afraid to look like an idiot. I'm not afraid to just go out there and put myself out there and speak in Hebrew. And I found overwhelmingly Israelis appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. So when you first came to Israel and you weren't afraid to speak Hebrew, like was it easy to learn it? Was it difficult? I mean, did you take Ulpan?
So I tried to take Alpan, and apparently you're not allowed to show up to Alpan with a 6-month-old child. You need
Ah,
to find childcare for that.
okay.
So they did not allow me to do that. It may have changed. They did recently update the rules that you will have up until it used to be you have up until I think it was 3 years to do Alpan,
Hmm.
and then you lose the benefits of doing Alpan. I think they changed that to
Got it.
8 years.
Okay.
So I would like to take Alpan. I think Alpan would definitely help me.
Right.
But I was at home when we first made Aliyah. I found a job. My first job was working from home doing customer service. I found
Okay.
it within 3 weeks of making Aliyah.
Interesting.
So I was working. I was working from home. So it was
How
basically.
did you find that job?
I sent my CV out to 400 places over
Interesting.
a month. Reach out to people, networking, social media, Facebook.
So you,
Facebook was
basically you found a job
a
because you put
message.
in the effort, the energy, you sent it
Oh
your
yeah,
resume
yeah.
everywhere.
That I can
Interesting.
also elaborate a little bit more because I've gone through a couple of different jobs since then of the
Yeah.
job process. But I was working from home, so I was working American hours from home. So I was basically gone Abba in the morning while my wife went to school,
Right.
and then my wife would come home. She would take care of my daughter while I went to work.
Right.
I was working in my apartment, so I would like go to the park with her and I'd hang out with her. Um, so that was the first probably year and a half of me working for this company, and then I moved on to a different job. But in that company, it was an American company that was here, customer service. So I was really didn't have that much Hebrew. But I would go to supermarkets. I would go around. I'd talk to the makolet. I'd talk to anytime I get on a bus, anytime I get in a taxi, anytime I'm around Israelis when I'm in shul. Most of the people that I was in shul with, my community, do understand English. They do speak English, but I would speak Hebrew to them, and they would correct my grammar. They'd correct something if I was stuck on a word. I'd say, "Oh, what's this in Hebrew?" And they'd tell me.
Interesting.
So they would definitely the Israelis really appreciate it because if you put in the effort, they recognize it, and they kind of are like, oh, he or she is making that effort. My wife's Hebrew is phenomenal, and it's totally different story. But for me, I now work in an industry where I do need to speak Hebrew.
Okay.
I'm in charge of the operations aspect of I work for a catering company. I'm in charge of kitchen event operations, basically the COO of the company.
Mhm.
So I speak with Sapakim distributors. I speak with workers, delivery people. I speak with some the landlord stuff like that. I have to do a lot of Hebrew, and I get by, and I do well. I've done interviews in Hebrew,
Mhm.
but an important thing.
Right now,
Yeah.
when you first made Aliyah, what was your opinion on the bureaucratic process? I mean, like opening up a bank account, I mean, getting healthcare there, or going to the doctor.
Okay.
Like, what was your experience like?
Okay.
Uh,
So it's let's. I'm gonna be a little harsh here.
Please
Um,
do, please do, please do.
it's a
I'm curious.
dumpster fire. It's a dumpster fire. I'm gonna be. The bureaucracy is just an utter disaster, and it's going to take. America is not great, but being in a socialist country, you're going to have to deal with socialist countries. At least I've found one of the ways that they get around to like cut costs. They have a lot of specialist type. They do a lot of specialist type of behavior, which
Okay.
means that if you need to do something specific, you can only do it at one place. You can't do multiple things at the, like for instance, if you were to go to your doctor, right? Your doctor would order a bunch of tests and you'd be able to do it in the same place, or right? In
Right.
Israel, you need basically you go to the front desk, you get the appointment, you go to the appointment, the doctor says, okay, you need this, this, and this test. Then you go into the waiting room, you go to the test, or you have to go somewhere else for the test, and then you have to come back to the doctor to read the test, and then it's just a whole game. There
Wow.
was one time my wife had to go for it was like an iron test, and she spent 6 hours dealing with this, and she went to 5 different places in one day just to deal with one thing.
Wow, that's
So
nuts.
yeah, so it's
That's
nuts.
crazy. I do want to just interject for a second. You know, you know, I recently just partnered up with Olim Advisors and Kimbash Real Estate on,
Hmm.
we're having a webinar on February 14, and this is exactly what we're going to be talking about at the webinar. So
Yeah.
if you're watching now, go to aliyahhacks.com and register for the webinar.
Okay. So
Okay,
yeah, no,
please continue.
100%. So a couple of other things. The banks in this country, there's no such thing as banking hours. There's such thing as labor union Histadrut banking hours, which basically means that your bank is open from 8 to 11 on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday opens up at 1 to 4, and then Thursday is only 4 hours. Like not uniform. It's the same as all week, but not uniform across the day. Um, and again, bureaucracy here is a dumpster fire, but everyone has to deal with the same dumpster fire.
It's true. It's a
There
nice
are,
Jewish
yeah.
dumpster fire we light on Pesach
So
for Pesach.
my father, as I mentioned before, has some health things,
Right.
and he's been basically running around doing all these things. And there is some really great nonprofits, one of which is called the Shira Pransky Project.
Right. I've heard of that
Um,
one. Yeah.
so they are really, really great at helping people navigate the health system.
Right.
That's what they started. The Shira Pransky Project was started by the husband of Shia Parensky. She actually passed away from
Hmm.
complications from, I think, cancer or something like that. I actually know him.
Wow.
We catered his. He's friends with my boss. We catered an event of his or something like that, and he started this organization because he felt that there was a very big need for Anglo representation within the healthcare industry of
Mhm.
helping people navigate it.
Got it.
So there's various different organizations, and also social media. I can't tell you how many times on social media, on a Facebook group called Secret Jerusalem, Secret Tel Aviv, stuff like that, where people say, "Oh, there's somebody who doesn't speak any Hebrew and needs help at the hospital." Some like a guide, Nefesh B'Nefesh, also offers that, where you can reach out to B'Nefesh. I need help navigating this system or whatever, and they'll try to find somebody to help you go through that
Right.
system. Take advantage of those things. My
Absolutely.
wife's Hebrew is very good, so we didn't really take advantage of those.
Mhm.
But if you don't have the Hebrew skills or you're not confident, definitely reach out to people. We also had family here, so we were able to reach out to family and help. But again, take advantage of everything that you can, um, and don't as they don't be afraid to be a friar. That's an Israeli term. Being a friar means that you're doing something that is against the normal accepted way. You're doing something. It, don't just take it. Don't just take it. Don't just like don't don't be a friar is what they say. Don't just take it. Like fight for your rights, fight for what you need. In the end, if you really fight for it, you'll get it. Unless it's like I want to be prime minister of Israel and you're only polling like 3 seats in the Knesset and you're barely going to get in, you're not going to be the prime minister of Israel.
Right. Now,
So
I just have like one last question for you because we are running out of time here. Now, there are people right now who are watching this interview, and there will be people watching, later on. What piece of advice would you give to our viewers who may be in your shoes now that you wish you had known of prior to making Aliyah? What advice would you give them?
what advice would I give them? Number one, if you are going to send a lift, buy flat packed stuff from IKEA. Don't send built things. Don't send things from America that you think you absolutely need. Like, for instance, my wife and I sent 6 bottles of agave syrup. We've yet to gone through one of them in 5 years. Like, you may think you need it, you don't need it. The other thing is that temper your expectations. Don't expect Aliyah to fix everything that you need in your life to be fixed,
Right.
because Aliyah is really, really hard. Living in Israel is not the end all be all. I'm happy to live in Yerushalayim. I love living in Yerushalayim. I love living in Israel. I love that my kids are coming home from Gan, singing Hebrew songs. They're not singing Christmas songs. Well, now they are because they're watching Netflix and whatever because of Weisinger. But it's a privilege to live here, but it ain't easy.
Right.
It is very, very, very hard. I do not recommend Aliyah for everyone. You need to really be willing to put yourself through the ringer to be here. And I'm for the better of it. So is my family. But it's not easy. And I've seen way too many people come here with the idea that it's going to save them. It's going to be the answer to their problems.
Right. And I
And they
do
look
want
at it going back.
and I do want to add that look, it's not, you're right, it's not easy. However, we have all these groups on Facebook.
Correct.
And we have all these organizations, all these companies that are there for you. We just have to find them. Like, for instance, we were talking about it earlier before we went live. You met David Eskenazi, and David Eskenazi started an Aliyah network. There's Olim Advisors. I know the co-founder of Olim Advisors. He created a few wonderful Facebook groups. There's Secret Jerusalem. There's so many groups out there. Just reach out, ask, and there will be someone out there to help out.
And one last thing that I do want to add, and this is a very, very important thing to realize. Olim Anglos are actually becoming more and more, not necessarily popular, but more something that is normal in Israel. But you can just see at the newest lists that are being submitted for the upcoming elections. The Anglos that are on the lists are not anywhere near being at the Knesset. For instance, Yamina. Yamina is headed by Naftali Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
Their Anglo, the sole Anglo on the list, I'm friends with him, is at number 17.
Mm-hmm.
On Yesh Atin is at 29. The reason why that's important to realize is that Israel, while it is welcoming to Anglos, they're not focused on Anglos. They're not here to accommodate you. They're willing to accommodate you, but Israel is going to exist and Israel is going to happen, whether there's English speakers, whether the people, you're going to have to become Israeli. They're not going to become Anglo. That's an important detail. You're not going to change their lifestyle. They're not going to change to what you want. You're going to have to change your expectations. You're going to have to change what you envision. It's basically temper your expectations, But just looking at that and looking at the current landscape, that is something that is very apparent just looking at the landscape of where Anglo stands in politics. And
Right.
that's a reflection on society as well.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much, Zevi, for
My
joining
pleasure.
us on this episode of the Alia interview.